Alrighty, welcome back. Let's get started. Hope you had a nice long weekend. So this week, because we had a holiday and everything, we are going to only have an assignment. There's no lab. It's just one assignment you want to work on over the due Sunday as usual. Assignment 6, Movie Database API Search. We're going to be doing more JavaScript today. Don't forget to do your attendance, Blackboard. Alright, so we are going to switch gears just a little bit. We're still talking about JavaScript, but now that you kind of understand the basics of JavaScript, hopefully the t-shirt assignment kind of got you used to getting user input, using different event listeners for different things. So sometimes you have to use onChange, sometimes you have to use onInput, sometimes you have to use onSubmit, sometimes onClick, right? Depending on what you're trying to accomplish, and what kind of events you're listening to. You use different events, basic different events. And I hope that, so now that you kind of got the basics of JavaScript out of the way, now we're going to do some other things that JavaScript is really good at. To do something like or we can talk like single time. So before we jump, we'll be working with stuff and kind of that's order. Sure, this is not like rating this one, but that's what we're going to do today as elements on you're pretty complete to work some content. Right, whatever I want. The browser presented. Every time you wherever you want to create a span to this day, all that stuff, and HTML elements also remove specify which so as a result, so iTunes make a let's see those or something fresh to page. When I search, I click search, there's 5 results. Let's do like 50 results or something. Notice how almost immediately I'm getting all the results. There's no page refresh, and notice how I just added a bunch of rows to this to these results. So we're going to be using purely mostly JavaScript to do this. So let me try a different one. So if I do here's another Taylor Swift or something, right? This is pretty this is like one of her newer albums. Right, so this is pretty recent stuff. And notice how, again, this is all just plain JavaScript, which I'm just talking to iTunes. I do not have a database of all this latest music. I'm simply utilizing, iTunes. iTunes is going to give me that information, and I'm going to populate it into my browser. And I'm going to build all these, every single row that you see here, we're going to build it really quickly using JavaScript as well. So you can see cover, artist, album. I think this is I don't know if this is going to work. Oh, okay, on my laptop. So you could even get it's a preview, by the way. It's only 30 seconds. It's not the whole song. So yeah, we can, thanks to the iTunes API, we're going to build something like this. And so using that create element thing that I just talked about, using that create element, we're going to be able to add all these rows here. So again, by default, there's only one result, right? But then the moment I search, I'm going to add all these rows to my results here. And then after we do that in lecture, your assignment is kind of on the same, as usual, the assignment is on the same line of thought. You're going to create a one-page movie search application, and you're not going to be using, you don't need to worry about getting the actual movies. You're going to be using an API called Movie Database API. You're going to have to follow a few steps. You have to read their documentation. This is just part of how working with APIs. You have to actually read the documentation. And as you can see right now, these are pretty recent movies, right? Yeah, so by default, when I first go to the page, you're going to make a request to this Movie Database API, and they're going to tell you what the latest currently playing movies are. So it looks like, yeah, Sonic just came out. I heard it did really well. There's Parasite, of course, and all the other, these are currently playing movies. Oh, I guess do it a little slow here as well. Right, so these are the currently playing movies. But if I search for something like Avengers or something, I'm going to see, there you go, I see the search results. And notice how when I cover this hover effect, which you've done before, hopefully you didn't forget, back in your assignment 3, you did this hover effect before. You put using position absolute, position relative, you can put things on top of each other, right? So you can, this should be a pretty expansive, there you go, it should be a pretty expansive Oh, we gotta search like Batman because that probably has like a ton of. Okay, like that. Okay, because that probably has a lot of results. Great, right? So these are pretty, as you can see, these are pretty pretty recent results. Pretty expansive results. So we're again we're luckily thanks to these APIs, we don't have to worry about the actual data set. The API is just going to give it to us. That's kind of pretty nice. All right, so speaking of APIs, let's talk about this. How many of you have at least worked with some kind of API before? Yeah, a lot of you probably. Because APIs are like everything now. But I'm going to quickly explain about what an API really is, and talk about and show you some examples. So API is short for Application Programming Interface. And essentially what APIs are APIs allow us to do is, APIs are essentially a bunch of rules or a bunch of documentation really on how other people can use your code. So as a developer, you work with a lot of different code, a lot of different libraries, but sometimes there's a limit, right? Like let's say on my website, I want to display, just like in the assignment, I want to display all the latest movies or something. Well, that's a lot of information, and that's really hard to get a lot of the movie information. Yeah, maybe you can find a database somewhere, but then you're gonna have to maintain the database, you have to upkeep it, or maybe on my website as a developer, I want to create like a Taylor Swift fan site, and I want to put like her latest tweets on my website or something. That's also a pretty time-consuming thing to do. Like I have to go to Twitter every time and manually like get her latest tweets. It's very, very annoying. Luckily, there's a lot of companies, a lot of other, or not even just companies, just open source projects where people write a bunch of code or give you a lot of information, and they also create an API. And an API is kind of like the middle layer between a developer like yourself and another service, whether it's a platform like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, or it's just simply a collection of information like the movie database API. APIs are simply a bunch of rules, usually in some kind of documented, that you follow to consume their information. So kind of like a good analogy, I guess. There's a lot of analogies used to describe API, but it's kind of like your plug socket. Like when you go home to charge your laptop or your phone or something, you simply plug in your plug into your wall socket, and you don't have to worry about it, right? Kind of the same line of thought. With the idea of APIs, at least the idea is that you don't have to understand all the nitty-gritty stuff of their complex code, of the service's complex code. You simply kind of plug it in or import their stuff in your code, and then read their documentation and use their defined methods to make it work. So you have actually been already using a bunch of APIs already. I just haven't told you yet. That console.log, document.query selector, these are all part of the web, what they call the web API. Somebody behind the scenes, some group of people created a bunch of things for the console, created a bunch of things for the DOM, the document, and they've defined, hey, this is how you use this thing. Another thing is, like, for example, video or audio. It was really, really difficult to do video on the web for a long time. But thanks to a lot of these video services like YouTube and Netflix, some very smart group of people finally came together and was like, hey, we need to make it easier to add videos to the web. So they figured out the hard part on how to put the video on the web, how to make videos show on the browsers. They got all the browsers to agree on what the standard would be, blah, blah, blah. And then, look, thanks to them, all we have to do now is just follow their API. They have all this documentation. So every time I want to create a video, I read their documentation and follow what they're doing and follow their rules, and we can put video or audio on our website. Okay, so there's so we have a bunch of web APIs that kind of feel like they come built in with JavaScript already, which is great. But then there's also these third-party APIs. So they're not part of the browser. or it doesn't just come with your browser, but now there's also third-party APIs that you have to bring in from literally third party, so it's not built in your browser. So there's a lot of, for example, the platforms like Twitter, Facebook, they create APIs as well so that developers can consume their functionality. For example, like I mentioned, like if I wanted to add the latest tweets from Taylor Swift on my website, instead of me trying to like manually type in every single time Taylor Swift tweets something, like me manually putting it on my website, I can utilize Twitter's API so that Twitter will just give me the latest, her latest tweets every time on my website. I don't have to do anything manually. For another example, maybe this is another common one that you see all the time. Like maybe you created a very fancy web application, you have a login system, but you notice that a lot of people have Facebook, so you want to add a login functionality with Facebook. Well, using Facebook's API, using Facebook's services, you can implement Facebook login on your website. Another example, let's say you want to add to the headlines of today's articles from New York Times. New York Times also has an API where by simply following their instructions, you can bring in the today's headlines in your website from New York Times. So on and so forth. Oh, this is another fun one. Now this just exploded more recently. You can even send text messages from your website, even though text messages is more of a phone thing. But using a Twilio for another company, they figure out the hard part right there. Twilio figure out the hard part of getting how to text from the computer to how to send text messages from website to all that. So all you have to do is follow Twilio's API. So this all sounds really great. And all of this sounds really, really great. Unfortunately, of course, unfortunately, the issue with a lot of these APIs is sometimes they're not very easy to use, and every API, it's totally up to them to create their own API. So Twitter is going to have their own API, they're going to have their own set of documentation and own method of how to use their code. New York Times is going to have their own standard, own way, own documentation. So everybody has such a different documentation, and I think I mentioned this before in this class, right? Like, I thought I would never have to really read anything ever again because I'm a computer science major. But because we end up using so many of other people's APIs, you end up, a lot of developers typically spend a lot of time reading these people's documentations, their APIs, and learning how to use it. Because there's no like common standard across all websites. It's simply it's totally up to them. New York Times could write their API however they like, and some APIs are a lot more difficult to use. Like Facebook's API is notoriously known to be really difficult to use because Facebook has a lot of privacy issues. So you have to like authenticate every time you access their stuff. Twitter is pretty easy to use though. Twitter is very developer friendly. So every API has their own ups and downs. But in general, I will give you some general guidelines on how to access third-party APIs. There's generally 2 steps. The first step is typically, it's not always required, but the first step is to obtain an API key. For your new movie database that you're going to be working with, you're going to have to obtain some kind of API key. And this is how they authenticate you. So typically you have to make an account with the creator, the provider, and then they give you this unique key, and that's how they identify it's you. So if you're abusing their API, they'll know that's how they want to know it's you. So you typically have to obtain an API key. With the iTunes API is really easy to use. So we do not have to obtain an API key. It just gives me stuff for free. But with the movie database, will have to obtain some kind of API key. And then secondly, because it's third party, again, these are coming from not your website, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is, they're coming from the outside. You have to somehow link it into your website, right? There's 2 ways you typically do this. The first way is kind of like sometimes they just give you a script tag and you just copy paste it in and you can start using it right away. Kind of like with Bootstrap, right? Bootstrap, we just copy the code that they give you, the link, the style sheet that they give us, and just copy paste it in, and boom, we can start using it. So that first way, the linking way, is great if they offer this if they offer this solution, but not everybody offers this solution. Or a second very common way is make HTTP requests to the specific URLs. So a lot of times, I think this is way more common now. This is getting a lot more common. If I want to access Facebook.com, I'm going to have to make a request, an HTTP request, to Facebook.com, and they're going to give you a very specific URL, like Facebook.com /account or whatever it is. And then after we make that specific request, they're going to give us the information we ask for. We call these like RESTful. So we're going to focus on the second part here, the making HTTP requests, because these are a lot more common these days. Although there's a few big players that use this option, but we're going to focus on the second option here, making HTTP requests to specific URLs. So we call these like RESTful APIs, REST, and if you will, API. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. Just for now, without going into this too deeply, we're going to talk more about REST and when we talk about the back end, when we go to the server side. But for now, just understand that these APIs, they follow a very strict pattern. They follow a strict set of rules and standards. So it makes it really easy. So they're trying to like standardize the way we consume APIs. So if you kind of hear, oh, this is a RESTful API, you probably have a good idea. Once we learn how to use one RESTful API, you probably have a good idea how to use these other RESTful APIs. So it's a way of how do we make requests to an API. So we're going to be talking about this in a little bit. So just to give you like what's happening when you're making an HTTP request, this is ultimately very simplified. Ultimately what happens. So let's say your computer wants to access Twitter.com's API and you want to access Taylor Swift's latest tweets. Your website is going to make a request, right? And then once you make a request, kind of just like how you message your friends back and forth, your website is going to message or it's going to send a request to the server. Hey, I need some Taylor Swift API tweets, and the server is going to take a look at what you want, what you requested, that specific URL you requested. And if it finds something successful, if everything went well, the Wi-Fi didn't shut down, and you made a correct request, the server then will send you some kind of response. So again, we're going back to that diagram that I like to show you over and over again. Every time you're making a request, this is kind of what it looks like. Your browser is going to again make an HTTP request for that URL. This URL is defined by Twitter. You're going to add in some parameters. The server, you're going to send that to the server. The server is going to tell you either okay, hopefully this is the response you get. You get some kind of response back, whether it's okay, which is 200, or you could get like a bad request, some kind of error back as well. And then also they're going to, on top of that, Twitter is probably going to give you some response back, right? They're going to give you your bunch of tweets, and it's probably going to be in some kind of JSON, in some kind of format. We're going to talk about this in a little bit. So this is like, again, every time you make a request to a server, there's a few things we gotta take a look at. The first thing is the endpoint. What endpoint do I need to call? What are the parameters? So this is like the general endpoint. Do I need to pass in any parameters? Maybe I need to pass in like the username, Taylor Swift, how many do we need to send, and a language, like is it in English? Okay, and then the last piece that you need to know is also what's the method of this request? Is it going to be a GET request or a POST request? So all this information is typically listed out in the API documentation. So these are the key things you want to look for. You want to find out, okay, what's the endpoint? What are some parameters I need to pass in to get my information? And then what kind of method is it? Is it a GET method or a POST method? Typically, when you're trying to just get information, like you're trying to get Taylor Swift's latest tweets, you're going to make a GET request. And typically, if you're trying to like post something, like you want to post new tweets on behalf of Taylor Swift or something, then you would use a POST request typically. But you do want to read the documentation on this, but it kind of varies. But ultimately, when you're working with a RESTful API, these are the three things you need to look for when you're like kind of browsing their documentation. And we'll practice this. We'll do this with our iTunes API in just a sec. So once all right, let's backtrack. So going back to my little diagram here, I made this request to the server. hopefully I did it correctly. I wrote the correct URL, passed in the right parameters. I sent this request to the server. And if all goes well, Twitter will then give me some kind of response back, and hopefully it's a good response, and they're going to give me that data back. If I ask for Taylor Swift's latest tweets, hopefully Twitter gives me Taylor Swift's tweets. Okay, great. Okay, the second part is that's great. They gave me some kind of data, but then how is this data formatted? Okay, so if I'm getting like 100 tweets, that's a lot of text, right? So there needs to be some kind of formatting that I need to, so I could parse out the piece of information. I could grab the pieces of information I need. There's some kind of format that needs to be standardized. Luckily, that's where JSON comes in handy. JSON is not a language. It's not a JavaScript language, or it's not a library, anything like that. It's simply a way to format data. So, just like at USC, when you're working with other people, sometimes you ask for things in a very specific format, right? When you do your homework, please submit in a PDF format, or please submit in docx format. JSON is just another one of those formats. You're asking. So a lot of APIs now, thankfully, thank goodness, they use this JSON format. When you ask Twitter for Taylor Swift tweets, you can ask for, hey, can we get this in JSON format? And JSON format is it's short for JavaScript object notation. And I'm so thankful that we live in 2020, that we have this format standardized. For a long time, JSON, there was no really standard format. There was JSON JSON existed for a long time, but there's XML. There was all these different ways you can share data across the server, and it was such a mess. But thankfully, not everybody, but most companies, most APIs now, the standard format that we transfer data across is JSON. So JSON is short for JavaScript object notation. So they actually kind of look like JavaScript. We'll talk about it in a moment. And because it's already in JavaScript object notation, as you can imagine, it's going to be it's so easy to use JSON format with JSON data with JavaScript. It's very lightweight. It's very easy. It's actually very straightforward. Even a non-developer can kind of read JSON. And it's very easy for machines, so the browser or the server, to parse or to grab pieces or to generate this format. And it is derived from JavaScript. It's influenced by JavaScript. That's why it's called JavaScript object notation. And this great thing about JSON format is, again, it's not a language. If you're trying to create a iPhone app or an Android app, they probably use JSON data as well. If your iPhone app is trying to talk to Twitter, Twitter's going to give it back to them in JSON format, right? So it's language independent. Probably you can get JSON format, even probably with Java or C++. I'm sure there's a way you can grab JSON data and then convert it into whatever you'd like. So it's used across a lot of different places. Yep, it can be used in a lot of other applications. So let's take a look at this. So we talked about objects last week a little bit, and how we talked about how you can create objects like this with simply using curly brace, just like that, and then have a bunch of key value pairs with commas. This is the JavaScript object. And on the right hand side here, this is JSON. This is what JSON looks like. It looks very similar to JavaScript objects, right? The only difference is that with JSON, this is all typically strings. Notice this. The keys are string, these are quotes. Keys are strings, the values are strings. So everything is basically a string when it comes to JSON. We'll play around with this. And with JSON, actually, this is important. You do have to use double quotes. You can't use single quotes. JSON can't have methods. It's simply it's a bunch of text. You can have methods in it. What else? Otherwise, everything looks pretty similar to JavaScript objects. Okay. All right. So let's kind of try this out. All right, cool. So just to kind of recap everything, a lot of web services have some kind of API, and to interact with the API, we can usually make some kind of HTTP request to an endpoint, and if we're successful, we get some kind of response back. And then the format we get the response back is in JSON. And JSON is really easy to convert to JavaScript objects, so it's going to be really easy for us to use. Okay. That's awesome. Okay, great. But now the last piece of this puzzle is how can I make these HTTP requests? And that's where AJAX comes in. AJAX is going to allow us to make these HTTP requests to the server. So they're kind of like our middleman. They're gonna go and make a request to the server, and when the server responds back to me, the AJAX is gonna tell me, oh, these are all the results. So we talked about this, how HTTP requests. Every time I make a request, you get a full browser refresh. But with AJAX, that's what it's short for, XML. Notice it says XML, but we actually don't use XML that much anymore. So using AJAX, we can use this object, XML HTTP request object, and using that object, we can send and receive information. We can ask Twitter for stuff, we can ask Facebook for stuff, Instagram for stuff, New York Times for stuff using AJAX. Something to watch out for, though, we're gonna come back to this. There's a lot of you've probably seen and heard the news. There's a lot of security issues these days when you're working with anything digital, really, whether it's a web app or a mobile app, even like anything connected to the Wi-Fi, really. So there are some security measures in place, and in this class we don't cover web security that much or at all, really. But if you're interested in security, it's actually a very fascinating area. There is a class called ITP 425 Web Application Security if you're interested in that route, because it's a crazy world. And they make a ton of money. But it is a crazy world. We just don't have time to go into all a lot of security stuff. But here's one thing to watch out for. So there's some policies in place that all websites kind of adhere to. One of them is called the same origin policy. So as you can imagine, me being a developer and trying to get Twitter's resources, trying to like get Facebook stuff, New York Times, as you can see, there can be some kind of abuse happening there, right? Like I could totally just keep asking Twitter like every nanosecond for some information and totally overload their machines. Like they're gonna get worked too hard, and then like I don't want any random person to come to my website and try to if I have a Taylor Swift fan site, like I don't want some random person to come to my website and like make a copy of my website and then call out their own, right? So there's a lot of like issues around when you're asking for resources from other websites. So actually, there's something called the same origin policy in place, where web browsers, they actually limit access between different domains. So if right now we're using itpwebdev.com. The default rule is itpwebdev.com cannot access twitter.com's resources. Like you can't just you can't even make a request sometimes. There's actually a very firm policy in place. And so the default policy is one domain can't just simply access other domains' information. You can't just make a request and grab all their stuff. However, as you can see with APIs, there's an exception to that rule. There's always exceptions. There's a lot of exceptions to the same origin policy. Whenever you use an image tag, you're actually accessing other people's websites, right? Like whether it was Amazon or Google Images. So that there's a few exceptions. Same with link tags and script tags. And also the fourth and the most common exception is so Twitter's API or New York Times API, they typically have this turned on. It's called CORS enabled resources. So Twitter has to allow so it's not up to me. I can't just go and grab Twitter stuff without any permission. Twitter is the one that has to enable this CORS thing, this CORS enable resources. And once they do that, now using my browser can access their resources. So when we're talking, so we're still in the client side area. We're still in the front end realm of things. The browser side of things. So by default, the rule is a client cannot go and just get Twitter's or Facebook's or Instagram's resources. It's absolutely not allowed. However, there are some exceptions, and one of them, and the way we are able, thanks to CORS, we are able to access. So when you're working with APIs, especially on the client side, you are working under this exception of the same origin policy. So if you ever try to, with JavaScript, make a request to some API, and then they give you this like a same origin policy or something like that. That's what it means, because you do once in a while see this policy. And as a result, because this is a rule, some APIs, to keep themselves super secure, they don't even let you they completely block out any client requests. The only way you can talk to a server is through another server. So there are some APIs that only backend can talk, only a server can make a request to another server. So right now, currently, we're still in the realm of the client side, the browser. So we're talking when the client is trying to talk to a server. There's this rule in place. We're going to be using AJAX. We're working under the exception to the same origin policy. So when you're working on whatever web project and you see it, this error is extremely common when you're working with different APIs. Same origin policy, that's what it means. You might have to read more documentation to see if there's another way to get around this same origin policy. So just keep that in mind. Anytime you're utilizing other people's stuff, other website stuff, you're probably working around the same origin policy somehow. Right. Okay, enough talking. Let's try this out. Let's try this iTunes stuff out. I'm gonna refresh. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a request, an HTTP request to iTunes. iTunes, if the request went through, iTunes is gonna give me back a bunch of data that I want from them, and it's gonna be in JSON format, hopefully. All right, let's take a look at their documentation, and let's click on today's lecture notes. Let's download some stuff here. Let's download my, let's, download. Okay. Download. Let's open this up in Sublime. This looks like it's linking to my old lecture notes. Yeah, it's fine. I'll update it later. The starter code is pretty much the same. So, all right, let's go ahead and open up iTunes.html. Okay, and let's open this up. Okay, good. All righty. So we have iTunes. We have iTunes.html open up here, and let's also click on the lecture notes. Also here, I also linked right on the second bullet here, I linked documentation to the iTunes API, so you can kind of take a look here. And again, whenever you're working with different APIs, you have to ultimately read their documentation, and it's very tempting to just not read it and try to just do it. But trust me, it's better just at the very least skim the documentation so you know what to do. So there's a lot of info here. I'll summarize it for you. This is great. So this is their endpoint right here. This is the endpoint. So they're saying that if you make a request to this endpoint, this iTunes Apple search, and then put in a bunch of parameters, pass in a bunch of parameters like the name of the artist, like limit or so on and so forth. That's all you have to do. That's what it's saying. And then for parameters, this is how you can add it. There's a key equals, this is like the syntax, value, and %, right? So this is how you can make a request to iTunes. You could even use dynamic script tags and things. So they're kind of telling you the different ways you can access this API. And then they give you a bunch of different parameters you can ask. You can ask for a search term. You could do like a search application. You could specify the country. Maybe you want to only look at like music from the US or music from other countries, media, entity. There's a lot of options here. So we can search through iTunes Store with a bunch of these parameters here. There's callback, language, even maybe you want only like English language or Spanish language or whatever. If you want to, you can actually also add a limit, so on and so forth. And they even give you, I love this as well, this typically in API documentation, they give you some examples as well. Take a look at this. Like, oh, if I want to look for, look up Jack Johnson's music by artist ID, if I happen to know that, I can do something like that. Oh, these are lookup examples. Oh, here's search examples. Okay, so if I want to search for Jack Johnson audio and video content, I guess he makes his music videos or something. This is like an example of the request you would make. With the search, this is the endpoint, and these are parameters. Or maybe I want to expand a little bit, like I want to look for Jack Johnson songs, but there's a limit of 25. So they give you some examples here. This is great. A great API documentation would always have some kind of example. So this is, even though it's a one-page thing, iTunes does a pretty good job of explaining what you need to do here. So okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna make an API request. We're gonna make an HTTP request to this URL, and hopefully we'll get 25 results of Jack Johnson back. So that's kind of our goal here. Let's take a look at now what we're trying to build here. Back to my starter code. As you can see, so what I'm going to be doing is I want to just add a bunch of rows to, I want to, every time I search, I want to add a bunch of rows down here. So how did I structure this? Let's take a look at the HTML I started with. And this is actually a really good way to start, even with your movie database, because ultimately you need to create this layout. Oh, by the way, it's also responsive. Okay, because I'm gonna have to ultimately create this layout, it's a good idea to kind of like write the HTML first and then add the JavaScript in later. So let's take a look at what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to create a bunch of rows. This actually looks like what this is that you see here is this is a table. I know we haven't talked much about tables in this class, but it's pretty straightforward. Let's take a look at this. If I scroll down here, so I have a form. First of all, great, I have a form here. Right, the form is going to take my input, my text input. It's going to allow me to choose a drop down menu. Okay, and then let's keep scrolling. Around line 69, notice this table. There's a tag called table. Oh, this is hard to see. Let me change this really quick. There we go, much better, right? All right, so around 69, right over here, I have a tag called table. And this table, take a look at this. Interesting here. This table, again, we haven't really worked with it. This table has like this T head. The T head is cover. It's the heading of my table here. Cover, artist, track. Okay. And then I have this T body tag. And in the T body tag, let's take a look here. In the T body tag, I have one big TR tag right here from 81 to 87. TR represents one row. And in my row, I have a bunch of like TD tags. TD tag is short for table data. And notice how they each correspond to, so the first TD IMG corresponds to my, like the cover. The second one, the Beatles, it corresponds to the artist, right? TD is Here Comes the Sun, right? The track, Abbey Road is the album, right? So on and so forth. So these are how, this is how you create a table. So anytime you want to, this kind of feels like a spreadsheet as well. Anytime you want to create something that looks like a spreadsheet, we use the table tag. So I'm just kind of going over what it looks like, because ultimately after we get the all the results from iTunes, we need to basically create a bunch of TR tags, so every table row, and fill and populate all these tags with the correct information. So let's that's out of the way. So let's go to JavaScript. Let's scroll down here and let's write some JavaScript. Let's make our first HTTP request using AJAX. We're just gonna go to the bottom as usual. We're gonna just kind of anywhere before the body tag, and I should be indenting this, right? But I'm gonna not indent it because I gotta fit a lot of code here. All right, first things first. Okay, so what's our behavior here? If I refresh right now, nothing happens. So nothing's gonna really quite happen until somebody searches something, right? By default, when I refresh the page, like by default, nothing happens, right? Only if somebody searches something, that's like when they click that search button, right? That's when I want the whole, that this is when I want to talk to the API and everything. So my trigger point is this form submission. So we got to create an event handler, right? Let's go ahead and create our first event handler. When user submits the form. So it might be very tempting. Maybe you ran into this t-shirt example. It might be very tempting to like, can I just like on button, like when this button is clicked, do the JavaScript? You can do that, but form submission is even better because if because when I search for things, sometimes the user doesn't actually click on the search button, right? A lot of times people just are lazy and they click enter. So to cover both cases, whether they click on a search or the enter button, the best, we want to use the onSubmit function. So let's go look for that what's that form called? The form is, let's go over here. Form, there's my form. It has an ID search form. Perfect. Let's go ahead and grab that. So I'm going to write some here. Document.querySelector. I already forgot it. It was a search form. Okay, good. Search form. On submit when they, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and remove all my indentation here so I can fit more stuff here. Okay, when I submit this, all right, when we submit my form, this is when things are gonna happen. First of all, though, let's go ahead and we need to know, like, we need to know what the heck they asked for, or what they're searching for, right? So let's go ahead and create a grab user input. Okay, let's go ahead and grab whatever the user just typed in. Let's do let search input, right? We want to grab whatever the user just typed in. It's gonna be we gotta go grab it. querySelector. I'm just gonna give it to you. I think it's search. Dang, I don't remember that. Never mind. I don't remember it. Let's double check here. Where's my search ID. Okay, that's pretty easy. All right, search ID. Let's go grab my search ID here. Okay, let's go grab it. Value. Okay. We're also gonna let the user choose like the limit as well. So let's get that as well. Let limit input equals document querySelector. I don't remember what it's called either. Label. Oh, here it is. So my select tag. There's my ID, limit ID. All right, limit ID. Okay, and just because I don't like to write too much code without actually making sure everything's there, I'm gonna quickly just search input. Let's also log out the limit input. I just want to make sure that I'm getting these values correctly before I even do anything else. Okay. Let's open up my console log here. Refresh. All right, I'm gonna go search for Beatles, and hopefully, if I click search, I should see the results show up. Search. Oh, interesting. What's this happen? What's happening? What do I need to do here? Yep, because I want this, I don't want to actually submit the form. I want everything to be in one page. I don't want any refresh happening. Let's go ahead and prevent the default, prevent from actually submitting the form. Okay, we're going to pass in the event object, and we're going to do event.prevent default. You could also alternatively do, quick review, you could also return false. That's another way you can like stop the function from actually working, but I think this makes more sense. It's syntactically it makes more sense. Prevent default actually does return false, though. That's if you're wondering what that is. Yeah.
Can we use this instead of event?
I think this is this would be the onSubmit. Yeah, I don't think you can use this, but let's go ahead and log out this here. Oh yeah, this would be the actual form itself. So in this case, at least in this scope here, this is whatever just got submitted, which is the form. So you can't, yeah, I don't think this would work. If I do this dot prevent, like, I don't think this even makes sense. Like you're saying, can you stop the form? I don't know. I've never done this. Who knows? Maybe you can. I don't know. Yeah, there's a weird error. Yeah.
So this only applies to objects, but not to events.
Yeah, event is a separate separate thing that we pass in. Yeah, about the object. Yeah. Yeah. So the event, event object tells me more about what the event that just happened. So right now it's on submit. So if I log out, let's go and log it out. Event. It tells me specifically about what the event that just happened. So not the form, but what event just happened. So if I search right now, I click like Beatles or something and search, it tells me all this information about what just happened. What was the event type? It was submit. What was the target? It's a lot of information. What time did they click on the event? Stuff like that. So it's a lot more details about the on what actually just happened. Yeah. All right, cool. So we're gonna stop this event, prevent it from happening, and then let's go ahead and let's make sure this works. So if I do Beatles and then 50 results, I should see great Beatles 50 results. If I do Drake and 10 results, I should see Drake and 10 results. Great. All this is happening perfectly. All right, so now that I have all this information, now we're ready to make our HTTP request. Now that I have all this information, I want to search for Beatles. I want to get 10 results back. I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and make our first HTTP request. Scroll down here, okay, let's go ahead and make our first HTTP request. Okay, so when I'm making an HTTP request, we are going to be we're going to create a new we're going to be utilizing an object called something called an XML HTTP request. Honestly, it's a bit of a mouthful, but that's just what we gotta use. And I have a lot of readings here. If you want to learn more about it, I'm gonna write all this, of course. But if you want to see a little bit more, if you want to review this information. To be honest, this XML HTTP request stuff is a little bit, it's definitely aged, and it didn't age very well. So some of the syntax looks kind of strange, but we'll go through it. All right, so let's go through this together. And if you want to read more, I have a lot of documentation, a lot of articles on it. But this is how we write AJAX using JavaScript, and this is we call this. So I'm using purely just JavaScript. We call it like vanilla JavaScript, plain JavaScript, right? There are other ways you can make AJAX requests using libraries. You can use there's something called jQuery or there's other libraries out there. But this is how we make HTTP requests using vanilla JavaScript using AJAX. All right, first of all, let's create a new variable, and we're going to create an instance of this XML HTTP request object. To make a simple request, it's pretty straightforward. There's a method called open, and we need to pass in two parameters. The first one is what's the method? I think it told me that it's going to be, yeah. iTunes should have told us that we're going to be using a get method. All right, get method. And then what's the second parameter is that URL. We're going to pass in a specific URL. All right, what's our URL going to be? Our URL is going to be that URL that we want. Okay, let's go ahead and do this. Where's my URL? They gave me example here, right? Let's get the example here. Just like that. So if I want to look for Jack Johnson, this is all I need to write, like Jack Johnson, like that. All right, so let's just type this in for now, HTTPS. Okay, and we're going to do itunes.apple.com, search, term equals, let's keep it simple, Beatles for now. Beatles, just all one word. Okay. Again, now I'm just kind of following what they told me to do. All right, and then once I've kind of done that, I got to do one more. I'm going to go and send my request off. I'm going to make this request to itunes.apple.com. Okay. So we're going to make a request. And then, this is interesting, right? We're going to make a request, and eventually, hopefully, eventually, iTunes will make a response. But we don't know when they're going to respond to us, right? But we can't just wait here forever either. So we're going to send this request, and then we're just going to kind of like, okay, we send this request, and then we will get alerted when iTunes gives back some kind of a response. And we're just going to move on with our life. Let's just console log and like, hey. Right? And then we're just going to continue down the here. So like if I refresh right now, nothing really happens, right? Right, so that's kind of the line of thought. So it's a little bit interesting because we're not just, we have to actually, we're not just going down through our code top to bottom as usual. There's a bit of like a waiting, not a waiting period. It's more like, we're not really waiting. We're not going to just wait here. But when when iTunes does give us some kind of response back, that's when we need to react. So this is when we're going to add there's actually an event. We're going to be using an event handler here. I'm going to say, oh, I didn't search anything. All right, Beatles, like, right, search. All right, hey, okay, cool. We see, hey. So we're going to, we need to be alerted when they give us a response back. This is where event handlers are also very useful. We're going to literally, let's do HTTP request. Okay, we're going to wait for my request. All right, we're going to watch out. We're going to listen for an event called onReadyStateChange. Okay. So we're going to just send this request off. And when we get some kind of activity back from my request, about my request, this function is going to get run. So it's kind of like my event handler up here, like on submit. It's the same syntax, on ready state change. So just like how this entire function doesn't run until somebody actually submits the form, same idea. Nothing's gonna happen until we get some kind of response back. This function runs when we get some kind of response back from iTunes. Right, so we're just, we're gonna continue with our life, but then if the moment they give us some kind of something happen, some kind of event happen with my response, we're gonna run this function. To keep it simple, let's just log this out right now. Let's just log out HTTP request. Oops. Okay. I think that should be fine. All right, let's go back to my browser here. I'm going back to my browser. I'm gonna refresh. Okay. All right, nothing happens. Okay, the moment I hit ask for Beatles, 10 results. I'm gonna click search. Ooh, okay. Notice again. So let's take a look at my log here. What just happened? I'm logging out my search input Beatles, my limit 10, and then I see hey, right? Hey, and then I see I'm starting to log out my HTTP request. So what I'm trying to show you here is this is not going to happen sequentially. We're not going to just wait for the state to change. We're going to still move on with my code. I'm going to do hey 4 times here, let's say. We're going to just keep we're gonna move on with our life. We're just gonna keep doing 119, 120, 120. We're gonna keep going until we get some kind of response back. Okay, the moment we get some kind of response, I just like log it back out. So what this is telling me over here, this XML HTTP request, it's actually telling me, hey, I got something back. Response URL, iTunes is talking back to me. Hey, I actually got some kind of response. Take a look at that. That's nice. And they gave me all this information. That's awesome. Okay. All right, so let's grab some information here. So what happens here, what the important one that we want to look at here is take a look at this ready state. There's like ready state 4, ready state, what's this? Ready state 4. Great. So we're going to wait for some kind of response back. And once we get a response back, there's a specific state we want it to go into. We're going to, when we get back a done state, ready state equals 4, let's do something with it, all right? So we're going to add one more stuff here. We're going to, okay, when iTunes gives us some kind of response back, as you can see, there's a lot of different activity happening, 2, 3, 4, or something like that, a lot of different activity happening, but we don't really care about what activity happens until we hit this done state. So there's a bunch of states happening, but when the ready state is set to done, okay, that's when I care about anything. That's when I want to get some kind of, console.log. Let's go grab the http.request. What I want here? I want the I want some kind of response back. Response text is going to give us a nice string, so I want that one back. Dot response text. Alrighty, let's try this. So I'm going to look for Beatles, look for 10 results, search. Whoa, there we go. We got a lot of this. Oh, okay, result count. Oh, 50. Okay, right now I just kind of hard coded everything. We got 50. We got, oh, okay, so this sounds like Beatles. That's great. However, there's one issue with this. What if, like, I accidentally, so this is great because I'm actually getting some kind of response back about Beatles from iTunes. Amazing. That's great. But there are cases where I'm not always going to get a successful response back. There are always cases where the Wi-Fi is like too slow, or Apple's iTunes, the API is down. We also have to handle errors. Or even, like, let's say I simply misspelled I had a typo in my URL. So when I make this request, Beatles, like 10 results, I gotta handle this error somehow as well, right? So, you can actually, even within this ready state, there's a way, once we've gotten some kind of response back, we can actually check for errors. Right? The first one would be if HTTP request status is a property we want to look for. If it's 200, status code 200 means everything is successful. That means everything went great. We're going to go ahead and console that log. Okay, otherwise, let's just, I don't know, maybe we'll just alert. Or, I don't want to alert. I get really annoyed by those. Let's just log it out, like AJAX error. And then sometimes it's useful to kind of like try to figure out what the error is. HTTP request status. So the status will tell me what the error specifically is, or a little bit more detail about the error. Save. Let's go back to, up to this one. Let's try this out. If I refresh now and I try to make like a thing, yeah, notice how there's an error, AJAX error, and I get a status code 0. Interesting. All right. So that's so this way you can handle for errors. You can have a little bit more information. I think you could actually get like status. What's the status text as well. So status text will give us like what kind of what error, or we'll try to give you some kind of error here. Oh, it's like doesn't, okay, it's 0, meaning it can't even talk to it. Okay, this is a pretty serious error. All right, but all right. So this is your complete AJAX. So this all the way from line 111 all the way to the end here. This is like your complete AJAX request. For any AJAX request you want to make, ultimately you're going to be reusing this code kind of over and over again. So alright, so any questions about that? So we made a request. We got some information back. We handled errors. Any questions about that? Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
So why does hey run before the function?
Why does hey run before the function? Yeah. Like this? Yeah. So again, this onReady state change, this function actually doesn't get run until iTunes gives us some kind of response back. So it's like, it might be 10 seconds, it might be 20 seconds later. So we're not going to just stay and wait for it. We're going to continue running our code. So we're going to run code 111, 112, 113, 116, okay, whatever, 133. It's going to keep going. And then the moment this change, that's when the code actually gets run. Yeah. A little bit different. Yeah.
Is this related to fetch? And if so, like,
yeah.
Use this
It's fetch is almost the same thing. Yeah, fetch also does AJAX requests. Yeah, fetch is a newer way of doing it. This is kind of the older way, our OG AJAX request. But using fetch, you can make make HTTP requests as well. Yeah, fetch is probably it's a newer way to do it. Yeah. It's probably cleaner. When you I gotta check. I don't know what the fetch, because fetch is new. There might be some browser compatibility issues. Like for example, like an older IE you might not be able to use fetch on it. I would have to look in a little bit into that. Yeah. Yeah, it's whenever it's ready, it's gonna be ready state is 4, or another way to write it is HTTP request is done. Yeah. It always is gonna do that. Yeah. Any other questions? Alrighty. Okay, great. This is half the battle, guys. Actually, when you're working with APIs, sometimes it can be kind of frustrating because, again, every API is so different. But this is half the battle. We got information back, hooray, and it looks like we got some correct information. Beatles, awesome. Let's make this a little more dynamic, though, right? Like, right now, I just kind of hard-coded Beatles, but let's change this up. Instead of term equals Beatles, let's add concatenate here. We're going to do search input, right? Search input. Let's also add a limit. They told me iTunes said to use ampersand when you're putting multiple parameters, equals, limit input, right? Am I doing that correctly? Yep. Okay, and then 115, and then that time. All right, and then let's try. So before I do anything, I'm just gonna try different results. Now I'm gonna look for Drake. There we have it. This is. Oh, there we go. Okay, 5. Oh, great! I got 5 results back, and this looks like Drake. Awesome. I'm getting some Drake results back. Let's do like Taylor Swift. I think it handles. iTunes is too great. Usually because I have a space here, I gotta deal with white spaces usually, but I think it just kind of handled it for me. Let me take a look here. We've gotten artist name Taylor Swift, and result called 5. Awesome. Okay, so now we're getting some more dynamic results. So this is half the battle, everyone. Just getting some results back, period, is sometimes a struggle. Now that we have results, so we've used our HTTP request, we have gotten some information back. We got some response back, and notice that this is all a string. It's a giant string, as you can see, because it's, there we go. And if you kind of look at this closely, this is that JSON format I talked to you about. So anytime you see like these double quotes and key value pairs, this looks like a piece of JSON string to me, but it's currently a string. Okay, so now that I have all this, let's go ahead and once I have all this information, our next step is to now we got to actually display the results on the browser. Right, that's going to be our next part here. I want to actually, now that I have results back, I want to actually like add things here so that I have a bunch of results displaying on my browser. Okay, so I can continue here. I can like continue to write all this in here as well. But my function is getting really long. With JavaScript, just like any other programming language, you can create functions wherever the heck you want. I'm going to go ahead and just create a function here. Just make my life a little bit easily. Let's create a function up here, like let's call it like function display results or something. Okay, so I'm gonna invoke that here. I just want to create it's getting kind of messy here. And I'm gonna pass in the very important information here, that response text. I'm gonna go and pass it into this function. Okay, I'm gonna go all the way up here, or no, not too far. There it is. Okay, and I'm gonna pass in the response here. Let's just call it like response text, I guess. Response text. Response text. Awesome. All right, so we have all this giant piece of string here. We have like all this, we have this long piece of string here. But ultimately this is a string. So how the heck am I gonna like, right, let's take a look at this. How am I gonna grab like, so I need to do a few things, right? I need to grab like the artist name here, the collection name, like track name. There's a lot of pieces of information I'm gonna need, right? I'm gonna have to grab it. Also known as parsing. I have to grab this piece of information and I need to display it in like the appropriate cells, right? The appropriate rows and all this stuff, right? So that's quite a bit of work here. But luckily with JSON works incredibly well with JavaScript. What we're gonna do is let's convert the JSON string into JavaScript objects, and objects are very easy to work with in JavaScript. So we're going to convert the string into JavaScript objects. All right, let's go ahead and let's call this like response equals response text. Let's go ahead and convert this. We can convert this using JSON.parse. Oh, wait. Wrong way, the other way. JSON parse, we're going to go ahead and parse my response text. There we go. And we're going to store it in a new variable called response. If I log this out, let's take a look at what that looks like. let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm going to search for Beatles again. Okay, so the first console log here is the same. It's the string. But notice right over here on the bottom, if I open up the triangle, oh, take a look at that. How nice is that? It's like formatted very nicely. So once I've converted this piece of string into a nice JavaScript object, just like that. And these are all values. Okay, I have properties and key value pairs, key result here. Oh, this result is an array. Oh, we know how to work with arrays, right? It's from 0 to 4. There, now I got 5 results back. If I click on the triangle 0, oh, this is a lot of information. The first song is artist name Beatles, track name. There's like there's like artwork is the image URLs. There's a lot of information here that we can use. So once I've converted this ginormous string into objects, I could totally using JavaScript, I can easily go grab whatever piece of information I want because these are all objects. Isn't that great? So let's go ahead and grab some. That's great. So if I want to like just to get some practice here, this is what I mean. If I do response dot results, for example, results count, for example, I'm gonna get back 5. Right? And what other information do I want? I want, like, for example, I want like maybe the first result back. So if I do results response dot what is that, result, I'm just copying this now, results square bracket, again 0, right? We know how to use arrays. Square bracket 0 dot track name, for example, and maybe I'll add some here. First song result is okay, so just like that, I'm able to grab any piece of information. Again, these are objects, so I can grab any information using my dot notation. I can do results square bracket 0, go get the track name, right, so on and so forth. Using dot notation, I am able to, there you go, let it be, grab any piece of information I want. Isn't that great? Alrighty then, now I have all these results. I want to show all my results. I want to go run through all my all these values here, and I want to display them on the browser finally. So what does that mean? Because I have an array of bunch of results, I'm gonna have to probably run a for loop, right? Anytime I gotta run through a bunch of results, probably need some kind of loop, typically a for loop. And when you're working with JavaScript stuff, we're gonna run through my for loop now. Let's run through my for loop, and I'm gonna go. Let's start at 0, and for every single result, I'm gonna do for every single result I want to create. So for every single result, create a new table row for the table and append it to the table. Okay, we're gonna run through all my results here. What is it? Response. So there's a couple things I could use. I could do response.results.length, like that. I could also use result count, right? Result count also tells me the same thing. So I could use results.length, which is 5. Same with result count, whatever I want to use. I++. And this is where we're gonna now that I have to add stuff here, this is where I'm going to now create some HTML elements, but I'm gonna create HTML elements on the fly using JavaScript. Create HTML elements on the fly with JavaScript. So what do I need? The first thing I need then, let's take a look at my HTML here, and my elements. Let's open that up here, H1, H over here. This is my table. Okay, my T body. All right, so every single row in my table is going to need that TR tag, right? So let's go ahead and create our first TR tag here. TR tag equals tr element maybe. All right, equal. Let's just call it tr tag. Tr tag equals document dot create element tr, just like that. Okay, just created one just like that. All right, in my tr, what do I need? I need 5 TD tags. Holy cow, right? All right, let's do this one at a time. The first one we're gonna do is, what's the first one? The first one is the cover art. This is the cover art. Okay, let's do trying to think of a better way to name this. Okay, let's go ahead and create that. We're going to document.create element, and we're going to create our first table data tag, TD tag. Okay, but this tag here though has a lot of stuff we also need. We need the image tag, right? Because this is going to be image. So let's go ahead and create that as well. Let img tag equals document create element, and let's create an img tag. Okay, and then let's go ahead and set some attributes here. So image tag is going to have an src, right? It's going to have the src. The src, the actual image here. That's when we gotta take a look at my response. Take a look at the response. Oh, there's a lot of information here about the let's see, what artwork. There's artwork 30. That looks like a JPEG. I think artwork 100 sounds the best. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to grab that piece here. We're gonna say equals where's my result? Response dot results, right? Results. Okay, results I, because for every one of them it's gonna be different. Results I dot artwork URL. Make sure we spell it correctly. Artwork URL 100. Thank you. Response. Yep. Okay, and then I think that's for the image tag. Oh, we should probably put a out attribute as well, but I'm gonna skip that for now. All right, and then if you're kind of like, okay, what did I just do? We can always console log these out. Let's just do image tag, for example. Let's go and take a look at what we just did. Beatles search. Oh, cool! I made an image tag for all 5 results. Awesome. So I'm creating HTML elements on the fly. I'm kind of following my pattern here that I already created. So so my first table tag is gonna be my image. All right, let's create the second one. The second one is gonna be my it looks like that's the artist name. Yeah, the artist name. So let's go ahead and create one here. Okay, let's okay, that's that one. All right, let's go ahead and create our second one. Let artist TD tag, because we're going to create another one. Create element, TD, right? Artist, okay. And then this, for artist tag, let's take a look in here. I just want simply a text. I just want to add text into my table data tag. So what attribute do I need to access? Yep, inner HTML. Inner HTML, we're going to fill that up with the artist's name. Again, we got to kind of look back at what they gave us. Let's take a look back at what they gave us. All right, so it's going to be response dot results dot not dots I, because we're going through each one of them, dot artist name, right? Artist name. There we go. Artist name sounds about right, like Beatles. There it is. Okay. Thank you. Very important. Yep. Artist name. Artist name. All right, so we're gonna be doing this several times. Let's okay. Let's do one more, and then we gotta get the track name, right? The track name is the most important one. Track. So as you can see, it's a little bit tedious especially if you're trying to show a lot of information, but unfortunately, that's what we gotta do. Cover artist track. we can do the next one too. We can do album. All right, album. What's the album? Album collection name. I think collection name. Okay, we do have to do. Okay, let's do the last one. The last one is a fun one, right? We gotta put some audio in here. So to add some audio, luckily we have a tag called audio tag. It's great. We're gonna use this audio tag and just use SRC just like with image, and we're gonna just put this SRC right in there as well. So the last one we're gonna make is my audio tag. Okay, we're gonna create this element as well. Just like that. And then audio tag dot src, just src, just very similarly. It's going to be response dot results and then let's look for it. Preview URL. There it is. Preview URL. There's one more thing I need to add to my audio tag here. Notice how I have these controls here. So if I want to be able to like pause the music or change the volume or something like that, there's one more attribute I need to add. It's going to be controls equal. We'll just leave it true. Alrighty. Okay, cool. So we created all these elements. I think I didn't really test it, but I hope I did. All right. So I created all these elements. Makes sense, right? So we're all creating all these elements on the fly. I ran through a for loop, creating all these elements for each of my results. Now I gotta do the last thing I need to do is, now that I create all these, is I need to let's go ahead and move this over here, back in here. All right, now that I create all these elements, the last thing I need to do here then is append all the elements together, right? When I simply do create element, I'm just creating all these random elements, all these HTML objects on the floor, everywhere, but now I gotta actually like kind of piece them together. And so we're gonna use append child for this. So whenever I'm trying to append things to something, that means I need some kind of parent. Luckily, I have this T body here, right? T body here. All right. So I'm gonna put, for every single result in this T body tag, I'm gonna add a bunch of TR tags in here. So my T body is the first one, and I'm gonna like keep adding TRs to my T body. All right. So let's append all the elements together. Where's my? So yeah, in the back. Oh, you're right. Yes, you're right. Great catch. Oh, wait. I have. Oh, yeah. I need an audio. Yeah. You're right. Awesome. Right. All right. Let's append all these elements together. Let's go get my TR tag. All right, my TR tag here. And let's start appending, or we could start from, yeah, let's do TR tag. Yeah, let's do TR tag. Let's start appending here. To my child, append child, okay? The first one I'm going to append is my image, right? But my image has a bunch of stuff in here. So let's append, maybe we should just append here. Append image tag together. So we're going to do, in my cover T tag, okay, we're going to append all the things together here. We're going to go grab my image. Okay. Okay, what's next? The TR tag is then we're gonna append the next one, which is the artist tag. Okay, there we go. Okay, artist. Then we're gonna do our track. And then my album. And lastly, I need to go grab my audio as well. But my audio also has a bunch of stuff here. We're going to have to append my audio here. Let's go get my audio tag. Is going to append my audio tag. I mean, I guess I could have. The exact location of this doesn't matter too much. It just you just need to make sure you you want to make sure you do the image, append the image together, append the audio together, append everything together. Okay, I'm already getting super nervous. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I know. I'm like super nervous already. Okay, cover T data. All right, looks about right. I don't know. Let's console this out. Yep, I already have an error. 116. Yeah, IMG tag. All right, cool. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I have my TR tag. That looks about right. Okay, I have an image. I have like Beatles in my life, rubber, my soul, or something, and then audio, and then okay, looks about right. Okay, the very last thing I'm gonna do then is append. Let's go and comment that out. Append TR to T-body, because T-body is my ultimate here. So we're gonna go document query selector. Let's go and grab my T-body. It doesn't have a what's called the ID or anything, and we're gonna do TR tag. Okay. Oh, we want to do this though. We want to everything is still in the for loop. So for every single result we get back, right? If I have 5 Beatles results, I want to create 5 rows and append them to my my table here. All right, let's test it out. Beatles search. Boo. Okay, let's take a look at my errors. 144. Awesome. Let's try this again. Okay. Yay! Alright, I'll bring back my code in a second. Let's try this one more time. So Beatles. Sweet. Okay. Here's one issue though. I'm going to do Taylor Swift now, and I'm going to search. What the heck just happened? Notice I keep appending my results. Drake, right, search. Notice how I keep appending to my body, so it just keeps going over and over again. So I'm going to have to clear up some stuff here. But before I do the clearing thing, any questions about this whole giant for loop here that I just did? A lot of stuff here. Any questions about this? Right, so this work here is definitely a little more tedious, right? It's more about like making sure you create, so like instead of writing HTML now, you're like creating HTML using JavaScript, so it's a little bit tedious. So most likely this, if this is not working for you, most likely you have a little typo somewhere, just like how I did. But any like questions about how this works at all? Right. So this is like the second half of the battle. First half, just make sure you're able to contact the API. API gives you some kind of results. Great. Once you have a bunch of results and everything is showing up correctly on your console, then we gotta build these HTML elements out so I could show it on here nicely. So I'm creating all these these TR tags and whatnot, and so it's a good idea to kind of how I started here. Even with your assignment 5, you want to create like the HTML structure first. So you kind of like lay out how your HTML is going to be first, and then write a bunch of JavaScript to just repeat the thing. things you do over and over again. All right, the last thing I want to do then, so I showed you how every time I search right now, I'm going to keep appending, like whatever I search, I'm going to keep appending to the end of my results. I don't want to do that. I want to like delete everything, right? So you can, just like we can append children, we can remove children as well. Let's go up in here to my display results here. So this is what I'm going to do. Every time I want to display results, what I'm going to do here is make it bigger again. Okay, and remove all so reset by removing within So we have this lovely method called remove child, which is going to allow us to remove any child we want. So let's think about it. I mean, I could go either way. I'm just going to, I just want to, every time I click search, I want to remove every single child in this T-body, right? So, I mean, whether I do first child, last child, doesn't matter. So this is a good use case for a while loop. Okay, we're using all of our programming stuff again, right? We're going to run a while loop. Oops. Okay, we're going to run a while loop in here. We're going to say while T-body, right? I need my T-body here. Let's do T-body equals document query selector T-body real quick. Okay, we're going to go grab my T-body. So while T-body, there's another lovely method called has child nodes. As long as it has children, we're going to remove the child. Sounds kind of sad. But we're going to remove it from its parent. That's what we're doing. But yeah, it's interesting how people came up with some of the verbiage we use. Anyway, last child T-body, we're going to remove. So while it has some kind of has child nodes, so has child nodes, it's going to return true or false. Returns true if there are children, right? So it's, as long as it's true, we're going to keep running this while loop. We're going to remove my child one at a time. And I mean, honestly, I could have done last child, first child, doesn't really matter. I guess last child might be a little faster, I guess. So we're going to remove every single child in my results, in my T-body, until we have no more children. So if I save this, and if I run now, so now I'm going to look for beetles again. I'm going to give like 25 results. Great. And then now I do like Drake or something, and I want like 50 results. There we go. Everything got deleted, as you can see. So now we're doing like a new search every time. Yeah, cool.
Why is it so much faster than you do on like the website?
It's first of all, it's using AJAX, so that makes it feel like it's pretty fast. There could be a lot of reasons. iTunes in general is just really fast too. They give the response back really fast because they're a huge company. They could afford that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of factors. Yeah. But using AJAX also helps because we're not refreshing the page, so we save a second, I guess. So it feels a little faster. Yeah.
Better to do remove last element child than remove last child.
Either works. Either one is fine. Like element will make sure that you remove every child element, but last child will also remove any random, maybe if it's not an element, white space, stuff like that too. So either one's fine though, really. Yeah. Okay, very last. Any questions about that? That's straightforward. As long as there's children, remove them. Okay. Very last thing. So as you can see, we wrote not a ton, but we wrote a bit of code here. And every time, so in this example, I'm only making one HTTP request. I'm just searching and that's it. But typically, in other cases, you might have to make multiple requests. Like in your assignment, you have to make multiple requests. You have to make one request to get the currently playing movies, and then another request to get the search results. So you're gonna make multiple requests, right? So to make a request is ultimately this piece of code right here, and so let's like organize our code a little bit. So with JavaScript is still a programming language. you can still have functions where any repetitive code can have functions. So a lot of times I typically move all this out and put it in its own function, because this is a this function here is gonna ultimately always make the request. So I'm gonna move this out into function. I'm not gonna do it now. I'll put it in the code that I upload because we're out of time. But I'm gonna move this function out, move all this code out into a function, and so that every time I make a request, I can just run this function. So I'm gonna now that we're writing a lot of JavaScript, let's try to organize our code a little bit, right? We can have functions. Any repetitive code can be in functions. Last thing I want to do, I'll do that. When I upload the code, I'll break it up into a function so you can see what that looks like. But the last thing I want to do here also is, again, we're writing a lot of JavaScript code now, and right now we've been putting all of our JavaScript in the script tag. But just like CSS, we can have external JavaScript files. I can create new file, call it like, I already have a script.js. Okay, we like to call it things like main.js or something. I can paste all of this JavaScript just like that, take it out, paste it in here. Okay, paste it in here, save. And then with my the way how I would import it is kind of similar to like this. I would do src and then main.js. So external JS. All right, and then this should still work, hopefully. It is typical, yeah. Especially if you have a lot of JavaScript code, yeah. Just to keep things a little separate. But you can still. I'm okay with internal JavaScript files still too. But just to get some practice in your assignment, you're gonna have to write your JavaScript file. Okay, that's it. I do encourage you to start the new assignment. This is the assignment 6. Assignment 6. Early. It will take you some time because you're writing it. So it's assignment 6. You're writing HTML and CSS by yourself. I'm not giving any starter code. So assignment 6 does take up more time, I think, than other assignments. It's also a really good review, actually, for your upcoming midterm because you have to revisit HTML and CSS again. All right, have a great one. See you next week.